They say every small town has its secrets, but ours has something worse. Stories. Stories of a cursed motel pool that claimed more lives than accidents on the highway ever did. Stories that people whisper about during storms, their voices dropping low like the rain might be listening. I never believed them. At least, not until I saw the ad. The day started like most of mine had that summer, broke, bored, and desperate. The only thing worse than living in a town where nothing happens is needing a job and knowing you won't find one. I had a pile of bills staring me down, and college wasn't going to pay for itself. So there I was, scrolling through job postings online, skipping over things like dog walker and house cleaner, when something caught my eye. Hiring now, pool assistant at Lakeside Motel. Night shifts available. My first instinct was to scroll past it. Everyone in town knew about the motel. People disappeared there. Swimmers drowned even when the water was still as glass. No one ever explained it, not the police, not the owners. My mom called it cursed. My friend said only idiots went near that place and they didn't usually come back. But then I saw the pay. $25 an hour for nights. Triple for overtime. Triple. My hand hovered over the screen. That much money could get me through the summer and then some. Maybe even enough for a new laptop. It didn't take long for my practical side to start convincing me that the stories were just stories. The motel wasn't cursed. It was old, run-down, and unlucky, sure, but not haunted. People just liked to talk. Still, I decided to ask my family what they thought. "You're not taking that job," Mom said when I brought it up at dinner. Her voice was firm, the kind she used when she meant business. "Do you remember Mrs. Callahan's nephew? He drowned there when you were in middle school. No one could explain how he got tangled in the drain like that." My dad, usually the quiet one, chimed in. "It's not worth the money, Elizabeth. Plenty of other places you can work." "Where?" I shot back. "The grocery store's not hiring, and the diner's already overstaffed. You want me to babysit again? That barely pays minimum wage." My little brother, Nate, made a half-hearted spooky noise, wiggling his fingers like a ghost. "Beware the pool of doom," he teased. Mom shot him a look that shut him up fast. "You'll find something," she said, her tone softer now. "Just not there, okay?" I wanted to argue, but the truth was I didn't have a counter. The stories rattled around in my head, mixing with the frustration of another dead-end day. I gave up and dropped it. That night, though, the ad came back. This time, it was different. Urgent hiring pool assistant, $75 for night shifts. My heart skipped. I double-checked the number. There was no way I'd misread it. Triple pay. The ad seemed to pulse on the screen, taunting me, daring me. This time, I didn't ask anyone's opinion. I clicked apply. The next morning, I told my parents. The kitchen fell silent as I explained the pay, the hours, and how careful I'd be. "It's one summer," I said, trying to sound casual. "Besides, they need someone at night. Nothing happens at night, right?" Mom chewed her lip, her eyes flickering with worry. Dad rubbed his temples but didn't say anything. Finally, Mom sighed. "If you're going to do this, you'd better promise me you'll be careful. If anything feels wrong, you leave. Understand?" I nodded, trying to hide my excitement. "I promise." Later, I texted my best friend, Alyssa, to tell her the news. "Are you nuts?" she wrote back almost immediately. "You know that place is sketchy as hell." "It's just a pool," I typed. "I'll be fine." Her reply came through before I could even put the phone down. Famous last words. I laughed it off, but that night, as I packed a bag for my first shift, her words stuck with me. The air felt heavier as I pulled into the gravel lot of the Lakeside Motel. My headlights lit up the chipped paint of the building's faded sign, a relic of better days when people might have actually chosen to stay here. Now it was just a place for truckers, drifters, and apparently desperate locals like me. A woman was waiting by the front door. She waved as I parked, her friendly smile just a little too wide, a little too forced. "You must be Elizabeth," she said, bounding over as I stepped out. Her voice was bright, cheerful, and slightly rehearsed, like someone trying to sell me something. She was about my age, with a sleek ponytail and a name tag that read Mia. "That's me," I said, trying to match her energy. "Welcome to Lakeside Motel," Mia said, motioning toward the building like she was unveiling a prize on a game show. "We're so excited to have you here." I nodded, shoving my hands into my pockets to keep them from fidgeting. "Thanks, I really appreciate the opportunity." She led me inside, where the lobby smelled faintly of bleach and stale coffee. The furniture was dated, but everything looked spotless, like someone spent too much time cleaning to make up for everything else the place lacked. "So," Mia said, clasping her hands together, "let me show you around and go over your duties." She walked me through the basics first: the front desk, the linen closet, the tiny break room where I'd spend most of my shift. Everything seemed normal enough until we reached the sliding doors leading to the pool area. "And here's the pool," Mia said, her tone dropping slightly. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I stepped outside. The pool was larger than I expected, surrounded by a chain-link fence and a few plastic loungers. The water was perfectly still, unnaturally clear, reflecting the dim lights like a sheet of glass. "Okay, here's where things get important," Mia said, pulling me back inside. "We have rules. You have to follow them. No exceptions." I nodded, waiting for the usual spiel about safety and closing procedures, but what she said next made my stomach twist. "First, the front door must stay locked at night. Only unlock it if you see someone standing there. No exceptions." "Okay," I said slowly. That wasn't too weird, I guessed. "Second, you'll check the pool every hour after dark. Make sure no one's using it. If you see anyone, ask them to leave immediately." But her voice faltered for the first time. "If you see something moving in the water and you can't tell what it is, turn off the pool lights and leave. Immediately." I blinked at her. "Turn off the lights?" She nodded quickly, like she didn't want me to think too much about it. "Yes, and don't go back until your next hourly check." "What happens if I just don't?" she interrupted. Her smile was back, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Okay," I said, my voice trailing off. "And one more thing," Mia said, her tone now dead serious. "If you hear splashing after midnight, do not investigate. Stay in the staff room, no matter what." I laughed nervously, expecting her to crack a smile or admit it was some kind of weird initiation prank. She didn't. "Why?" I asked. "It's just better that way," she said vaguely, avoiding my eyes. "What happens if?" "You won't need to worry about it if you follow the rules," she said, cutting me off again. We walked back toward the lobby, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more she wasn't telling me. My stomach churned as we passed the pool again. "Oh, and one last thing," Mia added, stopping near the staff room. "Never touch the water with your bare skin after dark. Ever." That one hit me harder than the rest. "What does that even mean?" Her eyes flicked to the floor for just a second before she plastered on another smile. "It's just a precaution." "Against what?" She opened her mouth to answer but seemed to think better of it. "You'll be fine as long as you follow the rules. I've worked here for 2 summers and nothing's happened to me." The way she said it didn't reassure me at all. If anything, it made me feel worse. Mia handed me a schedule and clapped her hands together like we'd just wrapped up a presentation. "All set. You start tonight at 10. Any questions?" I wanted to say yes, hundreds of questions swirled in my head, but I just shook my head. "Great," she said, practically skipping back to the front desk. "See you later." I watched her walk away, wondering what I'd just gotten myself into. The drive home felt longer than usual. The closer I got, the more I started to doubt myself. Was I really going to go back there tonight? But when I saw the crumpled bills on the kitchen counter and thought about everything I needed to pay for, I knew I didn't have a choice. I'd show up, I'd follow the rules, and I'd prove to everyone and myself that the stories about the motel were nothing but small-town superstition. At least, that's what I told myself. The motel was quiet when I arrived for my first shift, the kind of quiet that feels unnatural, like the building itself was holding its breath. The clock on the wall read 10:05 p.m., but the stale air made it feel later. Mia was waiting for me at the desk, all smiles as if I wasn't stepping into the most unsettling job of my life. "You'll be fine," she said as she handed me a flashlight and a key ring. "Just remember the rules." I nodded, trying to focus on the practical stuff. Which key opened what, where the cleaning supplies were, and how to work the ancient intercom system. The first hour passed without much excitement. I did my rounds, wandering through the dimly lit halls and checking the empty rooms. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, their flicker matching the uneven rhythm of my footsteps. By the time 11 p.m. rolled around, I was almost convinced I'd overreacted. Almost. I walked out to the pool for my first hourly check, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The The water was perfectly still, just like it had been during Mia's tour, but something about it felt wrong. I couldn't explain it. Maybe it was the way the light hit the surface or how the air seemed colder here. Then I saw it, a ripple. At first, I thought it was the wind, but the trees were motionless. The ripple moved again, faint but deliberate, starting from the center of the pool and spreading outward. My chest tightened as Mia's instructions echoed in my head. If you see something moving and can't identify it, turn off the lights and leave immediately. Swallowing hard, I forced my hand to move, fumbling for the light switch on the nearby panel. As the pool lights blinked out, the water disappeared into blackness, and I turned to leave. That's when I heard it. A faint splash. It wasn't loud or aggressive, just a soft disturbance, like someone had dipped their hand into the water and swirled it around. I froze, my back to the pool, every nerve in my body screaming at me to run. Instead, I walked, one foot in front of the other, refusing to look back. When I finally reached the staff room, I locked the door and leaned against it, my heart hammering in my chest. It's fine, I told myself. You followed the rules. It's nothing. But the image of that ripple wouldn't leave my mind. At midnight, I heard it again. The splashing was louder this time, insistent, like something, or someone, was thrashing in the water. Don't investigate. Stay in the staff room. The rule was simple. I repeated it over and over in my head, gripping the edge of the desk to keep myself from moving. But the sound clawed at me, dragging my curiosity to the surface. Just a quick look, I whispered to myself. Just to make sure it's nothing. I crept toward the window, my hands shaking as I pulled the blinds back just enough to peek through. At first, I didn't see anything. The pool was dark, the lights still off, but the splashing continued, echoing through the night. Then something moved. A pale, emaciated figure crawled out of the water. Its limbs were impossibly long, its skin stretched tight over sharp bones. It moved slowly, deliberately, its wet, stringy hair clinging to its face. I stumbled back, the blinds snapping shut. My breath came in short, shallow gasps as I scrambled to lock the door again, double-checking every latch. In the silence that followed, I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. The splashing had stopped, but the quiet didn't feel like relief. It felt like a warning. I huddled in the corner of the staff room, clutching the flashlight like it could actually protect me. The rules had seemed strange when Mia explained them, but now they were all that stood between me and whatever was out there. And I wasn't sure they'd be enough. I stayed in the corner of the staff room for what felt like hours, though the clock on the wall told me it had been barely 10 minutes. My hands were clammy, the flashlight slipping in my grip. The thought of that thing crawling out of the pool replayed in my head like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. But it wasn't a dream. It was real. The rules said to check the pool hourly. That meant I'd have to go back out there. The thought made my stomach churn, but I knew if I didn't do it, I might as well quit now and leave the paycheck behind. At 1 a.m., I forced myself to stand. The staff room door felt heavier than before, its hinges creaking as I opened it a crack. I peeked out, half expecting to see the figure lurking in the hall, but it was empty. The walk to the pool felt longer than it had earlier, the silence pressing down on me like a weight. The flashlight beam bounced with my shaky hands as I stepped outside. The air was still, the water eerily calm again. That's when I saw them. Wet footprints. They led away from the pool, dark and glistening under the flashlight, and disappeared into the building. My breath hitched. The prints were small, like a child's, and I instinctively looked around, hoping, praying, that someone had decided to prank me. No one was there. I backed away, my eyes darting between the pool and the trail of footprints. My gut told me to leave, to lock myself in the staff room and wait out the rest of the night. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. When I got back inside, the monitors in the staff room caught my eye. The security cameras flickered, the static hissing briefly before the images stabilized. At first, I didn't notice anything strange. The camera feeds showed the empty hallways, the dim lobby, and the locked front door. But then, on the bottom screen, something moved. It wasn't the pool. The camera wasn't even pointed that way. It was the east hallway, the one just outside the guest rooms. A figure walked through the hall, its pale body moving in jerky, unnatural motions. It was the same thing I'd seen crawling out of the pool, tall, gaunt and wrong. I froze, unable to tear my eyes away as it stopped in front of one of the doors. Its head tilted, its stringy hair falling to one side as it pressed a bony hand against the wood. The phone rang, shattering the silence. I jumped so hard I nearly fell over, fumbling to grab the receiver. "Hello?" I whispered, my voice shaking. "Hey, it's Mia," her chipper tone clashing with the situation. "Just checking in. Everything okay?" I glanced at the monitor again. The figure was gone. "Mia, what the hell is going on here?" I hissed. There was a long pause. "Just follow the rules, Elizabeth. You'll be fine." "That's not an answer." "You're doing great," she said, completely ignoring me. "Just stay calm and stick to the rules." The line went dead. Before I could process what had just happened, a knock came from the front door. I froze. The knock came again, louder this time. My heart pounded as I stared at the monitor showing the lobby. The door was locked, just like it was supposed to be. But no one was there. The rules were clear. Only unlock the door if someone is visible. But what if someone needed help? What if it was Mia, or a guest, or... I didn't know. My fingers hovered over the door controls, every nerve in my body screaming at me to leave it alone. The knock came a third time. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was guilt, or fear, or plain stupidity, but my hand moved before I could stop it, and I unlocked the door. It creaked open, and cold, damp air rushed in. A child stood on the threshold. Their clothes were drenched, clinging to their small frame, and their hollow eyes stared up at me with an emptiness that made my blood run cold. Water dripped from their hair, pooling at their feet. "Can I come in?" the child asked, their voice soft but echoing like it was coming from far away. Every instinct I had screamed no, but my lips refused to move. I stood there, frozen, as the child took a single step forward. That's when I saw their hands. Thin and pale, the skin wrinkled like they'd been underwater for hours. I slammed the door shut and locked it, stumbling backward. The child didn't knock again. They just stood there, staring, their empty eyes boring into me through the glass. I retreated to the staff room, locking that door as well and collapsing into the chair. My mind raced, replaying the events of the last hour. The monitors showed the lobby again. The child was gone. But something told me the night was far from over. I couldn't stop shaking. Every muscle in my body was tense, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. The child's hollow eyes were burned into my memory, their soft, unnatural voice replaying over and over. The clock read 3:15 a.m. The longest hours of my life stretched ahead of me, and I wasn't sure I could make it through. The monitors flickered again. My eyes darted to the one showing the hallway outside the staff room. It was empty, but I could swear I heard faint footsteps. Wet, dragging footsteps coming closer. Suddenly, there was a knock at the staff room door. I froze. "Elizabeth?" "It's Mia." Relief and confusion crashed over me. Why was Mia here? Slowly, I unlocked the door, still gripping the flashlight tightly as I opened it a crack. Mia stood there, perfectly dry and perfectly calm, as if this were just another night at work. "What are you doing here?" I hissed, pulling her inside and locking the door behind her. She smiled, that same unnerving calmness she'd shown during the tour. "Checking on you? It's your first night after all." "Mia, what's going on?" I saw there was something in the pool, and then this kid. My words tumbled out in a panicked rush. Mia held up a hand, cutting me off. "Take a deep breath." I glared at her. "Don't tell me to calm down. You knew this place wasn't normal, didn't you? The rules, the pool. What is it?" Mia sighed and leaned against the desk, as if she were settling in for a casual chat. "The pool, it's not just a pool. It's a connection to something else, something older than this town. Spirits, entities, whatever you want to call them, they're drawn to it. Especially those who've drowned. The rules are there to keep them from getting too close." I stared at her, my heart pounding. "Too close? Mia, I've seen things tonight that shouldn't exist. Why didn't you warn me?" "I did," she said simply. "I gave you the rules. They're not meant to stop everything, just minimize the danger. As long as you follow them, you'll be fine. Usually." "Usually?" My voice cracked. Mia's expression darkened. "Look, the rules work, if you don't break them, but once you do." She trailed off, her eyes drifting toward the monitors. "The pool doesn't like it when you break the rules, it gets stronger." A cold chill ran through me. "You knew this would happen, didn't you?" Mia didn't answer right away. Instead, she stood and walked to the monitor showing the pool. The water was dark, still, and impossibly quiet. "It's a test," she said finally. "This job, the first night is always the hardest. If you make it through, the pool loses interest, mostly. But if you break the rules..." She glanced at me, her face unreadable. "It's like throwing gasoline on a fire." I swallowed hard. "You've done this before. You've seen this happen." Mia nodded. "I've been here for 2 years. I've trained 5 people, including you. Some made it. Some didn't." My stomach turned. "You just let them." "I don't interfere," she said sharply. "That's another rule. You're on your own your first night. If you can't handle it, you don't belong here." My anger flared, momentarily overriding my fear. "How can you just stand by and let this happen? Do you even care?" Her eyes flickered with something. Guilt, maybe, or regret. "I care, but this isn't something I can fight. The pool doesn't just affect the water, it affects us. The more you try to resist it, the more it takes. That's why I follow the rules, and why you need to, too." I felt sick. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they created was horrifying. This wasn't just a summer job, it was a trap, a twisted game where survival was the only prize. "What happens if I don't make it?" I whispered. Mia didn't answer right away. Her gaze shifted back to the monitor showing the pool, her face unreadable. "You don't want to find out." The silence that followed was deafening. I wanted to scream, to demand more answers, but deep down I already knew what she wasn't saying. The pool wasn't just dangerous, it was alive, and it was watching me. "I have to finish my shift," I said finally, my voice hollow. Mia nodded. "Just follow the rules. Don't let it get to you. And whatever happens, don't go near the water." With that, she left, her footsteps fading into the distance. I locked the door behind her, the weight of her words settling over me like a suffocating blanket. The clock read 3:30 a.m. 2.5 more hours. The minutes dragged by like hours. Every sound seemed amplified in the silence. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the faint creak of the buildings settling, the pounding of my own heart. The clock read 4:45 a.m. Sunrise was close, but the night wasn't done with me yet. I sat in the staff room, clutching the flashlight as if it were a lifeline. Mia's words echoed in my mind. "Don't let it get to you. Follow the rules." But the rules didn't feel like enough anymore. The monitors flickered again, pulling my attention. The screen showing the pool caught my eye first. The water rippled violently, as if something massive were thrashing beneath the surface. But there was no wind, no movement around the pool itself. Then, the splashing started. It wasn't faint this time. It was loud, frenzied, like dozens of hands slapping the water. My chest tightened, the sound growing louder until it felt like it was coming from inside the staff room. I forced myself to look away from the screen, my hands shaking as I fumbled for the list of rules. My eyes scanned the paper, desperate for some guidance, but I already knew there was no rule for what I was facing. The door to the staff room rattled. I froze. "Elizabeth." The voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it was unmistakably the voice of the child I'd seen earlier. "Let me in," they said. "I'm so cold." My throat tightened. I knew better than to answer, but the sound of their voice was unbearable, pleading, pitiful, and wrong. "The rules. Follow the rules." The door rattled again, harder this time. Then came another voice, this one older, raspier. "You're not safe in there." I stared at the monitors, my breath hitching as new figures appeared. They came from the pool, pale and gaunt, their hollow eyes fixed on the building. Men, women, children. They emerged one by one, their movements slow and deliberate. One of them turned toward the camera, their face impossibly close, and for a brief moment, I thought they were looking right at me. The door rattled again, harder still, and I knew I had a choice to make. I could run, leave the motel, break every rule, and take my chances with whatever came next. Or I could stay, follow the rules, and hope that dawn would save me. My hand tightened around the flashlight. "I'm not leaving," I whispered to myself. I forced myself to stand, my legs trembling beneath me, and walked to the staff room door. I locked it again, just in case, and took a deep breath. The knocking stopped. For a moment, there was silence. Then the monitors erupted into static, the hissing noise so loud I had to clap my hands over my ears. When the images returned, the figures were gone. The pool was empty again. The clock read 5:30 a.m. I sat down, my body and mind exhausted, and waited for the longest 30 minutes of my life. The silence was deafening. But I didn't dare let my guard down. At 6 a.m., the first rays of sunlight spilled through the window. The tension in the air lifted almost immediately. The monitors went dark for a moment before cycling back on, showing nothing but the empty halls and the still, ordinary pool. I opened the staff room door cautiously, stepping into the lobby as if it might still be a trap. But the motel was quiet. Peaceful even. Mia was waiting for me. "You made it," she said with a smile. I didn't answer right away. My mind was still reeling from the night's events, and the sight of her calm, cheerful demeanor made my stomach churn. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mia shrugged. "Now you understand why this job pays so well." "That's it?" I demanded, my voice rising. "I just go home? Pretend this never happened?" She nodded. "Pretty much, unless you want to stick around. Most people don't, but hey, the pay's good." I shook my head, too tired to argue. "I'm done." Mia didn't seem surprised. "Suit yourself. Just remember, don't talk about this place, and if you ever change your mind, we're always hiring." I left without another word, the weight of the night pressing down on me like a physical burden. When I got home, my family was waiting. They didn't ask what happened, and I didn't tell them. I just warned them never to go near the motel. The job was over, but the memories weren't. Every time I close my eyes, I see the pool. The ripples, the figures, the child at the door. I survived, but I'll never forget.